Hello and welcome to part 1 in a series of videos that I will be putting out this week, where I try to break down as many of the fights taking place this weekend at UFC 240 as possible. Now I say I'm going to try and break down as many fights as possible because if you watched last week's videos you will know that today, in fact in around 2 hours time, my dad is going into hospital to have ankle replacement surgery, so I want to be in hospital a lot this week taking care of him. And then also when he comes home from hospital on Thursday or Friday, I'm going to be spending a lot of time at his house, cooking for him, helping him go to the toilet, cleaning up after him, all that kind of stuff. He's in his 70s, so he is going to need a lot of my help. So because of that, I'm not too sure how many breakdown videos I'm going to be able to put out over the next few weeks, because my dad is going to need a lot of my help over the next few weeks. But pretty soon, hopefully he'll be healed up and I'll be back on the channel pumping out these videos as regularly as possible. But there is a small piece of good news. So I was planning on basically going into hospital with my dad and basically spending all day and all night there until the hospital kicked me out. And he's probably going to be in hospital for about 2 or 3 days, which would have obviously had a big impact on my ability to produce these breakdown videos. But I actually found out today when I spoke to him that I'm not actually allowed to do that. So apparently I can only go in for like 2 or 3 hours a day for visiting hours, which I didn't realise, which means I'm going to be able to spend a lot more time at home this week doing research than I thought I would. So I'll probably be able to bring a lot more breakdown videos to you this week than I thought I would. So actually the impact of my dad's surgery probably isn't going to affect the channel until next week when he's home and I'm spending a lot of time over his house cooking, cleaning for him, that kind of thing. So it's all good this week. False alarm. He's going into surgery in a few hours time. Fingers crossed he pulls through. He's quite a physically fit guy for 70. I hope I'm as looking as good as him when I'm that age anyway. So yeah, fingers crossed he pulls through. It's all good. And I also just want to make it very, very, very clear that my dad going into hospital for surgery will not have any impact on the service I provide my members on my website. I will still be offering my live betting tips to my elite members on Saturday night. I'll still be researching all the fights on all the upcoming cards and pumping out bets for all my members. I'll also be doing live bets for all my members. My dad going into hospital will not affect my website. The only reason why it will affect my YouTube channel is because it does take a lot of time to produce these videos, and it's just basically the easiest thing to trim out of my life at the moment when shit is getting crazy. But as soon as it settles down, can't wait to bring them back, because you guys watching this video, you mean a hell of a lot to me. You really, really do. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and hopefully can pay you back for the support by lining your pockets with silver, helping you make some cash this weekend. So what else do I have to talk about? So I don't want this video to end up being super long, but we do have to go back over the results from the month, so we'll skim through them quickly. Won't go into too much details. We don't want the video to be crazy long, but obviously July is going pretty well for us so far. Kicked the month off with a very nice big winner on Bellator 224, first major event in July, with the over 1.5 rounds bet on the fight between Chidi Njokuani and Rafael Carvalho. Very, very nice. Followed that up the night after on UFC on ESPN plus 13 with an even bigger winner, big 2-unit bet on Jermaine de Randamie at underdog odds to put us in a very, very cheeky profit for the month, around about 5 units. And then last weekend, unfortunately, the money train came to a halt when we had to stop off at a little station in the middle of nowhere and take a small loss on Steven Peterson. But we knew Peterson would be a really big gamble. When you bet on a guy like Steven Peterson, is never going to be a safe bet. That's the risk you take. So I guess, we haven't really spoke about this bet, so just to quickly go over, my thoughts on the bet. I actually think we got quite a bit unlucky here, boys. I really do think we got quite a bit unlucky, because if you look at the end of the first round with how easily Peterson was able to control Caceres on the ground, and also how easily he was able to control him on the ground in the third round, that was Peterson's path to victory. We knew he would absolutely struggle if the fight stayed standing, but we knew on the ground he had a huge advantage, and we were kind of banking on the hope that he would be able to get the fight to the ground. and control Caceres for large periods of the fight, because historically Caceres has had bad takedown defense, a very low level ground game, and typically speaking, when you put Caceres on his back, he struggles to get back to his feet. We kind of saw that at the end of the first round and the end of the third round. But we actually got lucky in this fight under normal circumstances, and it actually worked against us. So at the end of the first round, Alex Caceres went back to John Crouch in his corner, head trainer at the MMA lab, and he told John Crouch that he broke his hand. Now, whenever a fighter sustains a serious injury like that, it's usually a good idea to bet against them, because obviously, it's a fucking pro MMA fight. It's not going to be easy to fight with one hand. So when Caceres, at the end of the first round, told his coach he broke his hand, I thought Peterson at that point was going to cruise to a win. I actually added more money to Peterson live at the end of the first round. And I mean, a pro tip for you, I earn the majority of my money live betting on MMA. If ever a fighter goes back to their corner at the end of round one and they tell their corner man they're dealing with a significant injury like a blown knee or a broken hand or a dislocated shoulder or something, fucking bet against them. Because if you can get decent odds, obviously if they, the odds are crazy, don't. If the odds are decent, fucking bet against them, because when a fight is seriously impaired at the end of the first round, chances are it's going to have a massive impact on their performance in the second and third round. So taking away this matchup, take this matchup out of the picture. If you can bet against a fighter that's sustained a substantial injury, you should take that opportunity. And when Caceres said he broke his hand, I thought our Peterson bet was looking in great shape. But in a strange turn of events, I actually think that by Caceres breaking his hand, it actually worked against us. And this is why we got a little bit unlucky. Because throughout Caceres' career, if you look at his MMA records, 15-12, obviously fights are never fought on paper, they're fought in a cage. But if you look at his record, it is a complete mess. And one of the reasons why Caceres' record is so sketchy, split decisions, lots of losses. One of the reasons why his record is so messy is because he's got bad fight IQ and he makes a lot of mistakes in fights. It's quite easy to bait Caceres into making mistakes because he's a martial artist. He loves to prove himself in different areas, and it's quite easy to bait him into reckless exchanges or throwing flashy kicks or things like that because he likes to have fun in the octagon. And that's why I thought Peterson would be a good bet here, because Peterson applies so much pressure to his opponents. I thought eventually we'd see Caceres start to make some mistakes, throw flashy kicks, get sucked into reckless exchanges, and as a result overcommit and give up easy takedowns. And we know, as we saw in the fight, Peterson's advantage on the ground was huge. But it actually worked against us, because for the first time in Caceres' career, the irony of him breaking his hand in round one was the fact that I think it was actually the best performance of his career. After he broke his hand in round one, it was almost like he went into survival mode. And because he knew he only had one hand to fight with, for the first time in a long time, he actually fought smart. He didn't get sucked into any crazy exchanges. He didn't start throwing flashy kicks. He stayed true to what was working for him, true to a game plan. He circled on the outside, used excellent footwork, played the role of matador, and picked Steven Peterson off as he came forward and used Peterson's forward pressure against him. It was a flawless performance from Caceres, best performance of his career. But I actually think the fact that he broke his hand after round one helped him. I think it made his performance better, because all of a sudden, instead of focusing on being exciting and throwing flashy strikes and entertaining the crowd, which is what a trap Caceres usually falls into, which is why we bet against him here, which is why his record is so sketchy on paper. It was almost like he went into survival mode and he wanted to protect his hand. And just thought, I'm just going to try and get through this fight and do the best job I can with the tools I've now got. It was a flawless performance from Caceres. I saw some people scoring the fight for Peterson. I could see why. Obviously, he finished the first round strong, the third round strong. I personally scored it 29-28 for Caceres. I think it was good judging. Even though Peterson did end the round with a takedown and some ground and pound, I do feel like the damage Caceres was able to do prior to that in round three counted for a lot more. The only thing I would say is one of the judges scored a 30-27 Caceres, which is a fucking terrible scorecard, because round 3 is subjective which way you score it. You know, you could give it to Peterson for the last minute of top control and ground and pound. You could give it to Caceres for outstriking him for the 4 minutes leading up to that and the damage. But I don't see how you give Caceres round 1, because for, you know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, the end of that round, he had his back controlled by Steven Peterson. Body triangle fully locked in. That's the second most dominant position in MMA, and it's not like Caceres did loads of damage or outstruck him by a wide margin leading up to that. So it's water under the bridge. It didn't affect the actual outcome of the fight, but I thought the judges were a little bit off there. So yeah, we took a bit of a gamble on Peterson. He's never going to be a safe bet, but at the end of the day, you know, that's the way it goes. We knew that it was like a 60-40 fight. You can never feel too confident in a guy like Peterson. That's why we kept the unit size small at 1 unit, and didn't come through for us. But if you keep putting your money in these strong positions, you know, you will make money over time. And speaking of calculated gambles, and oh my god, I'm going to get torn apart in the comments for this one. So speaking of calculated gambles, speaking of hunting for strong positions to put your money, I believe I have found a very strong position to put our money this weekend, and I believe I have found one of the best, most calculated gambles of the year. Actually, one of my favourite calculated gambles of the year. So where do I begin? I need to choose my words carefully here, because I know I'm going to get destroyed in the comments for all the stuff I'm about to say. So I'm trying to do damage limitation, because there are a lot of people who watch these videos that don't understand probabilities. They don't understand risk to reward ratio. You know, they don't understand the concept behind finding strong positions to put your money and earning a profit over the long term. Everyone wants to win every bet, and everyone just wants picks, and they don't. A lot of people don't understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's more important to find strong positions to put your money than just to try and pick which fighters will win. You know, that's irrelevant. We're looking for the strong positions so we can actually make money. So right off the bat, I want to make it very, 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 very clear that I think Max Holloway beats Frankie Edgar this weekend. I want to make it very clear that I think Holloway beats Frankie Edgar. I have to make that very clear. Please remember, at any stage in this breakdown, please remember that if you think I'm a fool, or I'm a clown, or I'm an idiot, or I have no idea what I'm talking about, when I'm about to say the things I'm about to say, please just remember I'm on your side. I think Holloway will win this fight, okay? If you find anyone that tells you they think it's more likely that Frankie Edgar wins this fight, they're crazy. They're crazy. It's just simply not the truth. You know, Max Holloway is one of the greatest featherweights of all time. He is continually improving from fight to fight. He is an incredibly technical striker. He's got cardio for days. He's tough as hell. And he's got a huge size advantage over Frankie Edgar. This is a very difficult fight for Frankie Edgar. I do think that Holloway will win this fight. But remember, we're not trying to pick winners. We're not trying to be the smartest guy at the bar. We're not trying to prove a point. And we know that one winning or losing bet does not define us. This is a marathon. And over the course of a year, I'll place between 400 and 600 bets. I don't give a fuck if Jermaine Durandame wins. I don't give a fuck if Steven Peterson loses. All I care about at the end of the year, when I look back on the year, is that I made more money than I lost. That's all I care about. And one of the ways you can ensure you make more than you lose, one of the ways you can ensure you make a profit, is by consistently putting your money in strong positions. And sometimes that means betting on fighters who you actually think will lose. And I know that concept will not make sense to a very, very large percentage of people watching this video. And if you're one of them and you think that's a stupid concept, just dislike the video, unsubscribe from me, and just go away and never watch me again. It's cool. We don't have to agree. This is free content. You don't have to watch me. You can chip off and watch someone else. On the other hand, if you're just wondering what I've just said, why would you bet on a fighter that you actually think is going to lose? If that intrigues you, if you don't want to just dismiss that straight away, if that intrigues you, go away and learn about, risk to reward ratios, probabilities. There are some great books on this concept, more tailored towards investing. Best one I can think of is Angel by Jason Calacanis, that explains the principles of angel investing and how you have to put your money in a lot of positions where it's probably going to lose to hit the big winners. And even though, betting on MMA isn't the same context, because when you hit big winners in angel investing, you're doing 100x or 1000x on your money, the same principles on a much more micro level are relevant. So if you are interested in this concept and you don't want to dismiss what I'm telling you, please go look into that. So, do I think Frankie Edgar wins this weekend? No, I don't think Frankie Edgar wins. I really don't. I think Max Holloway wins. He's got everything on his side, almost everything on his side. But the question is not always who do I think will win. Question is, what probability do I give each fighter of winning? Okay? And the question to follow up from that is, do I think Frankie Edgar can win? And the answer to that is yes. Do I think he will win? No. Do I think he can win? Yes. One word difference in those sentences, but they give a completely different meaning. So when you're capping fights, you've always got to try and assign a probability that each fighter has of winning, and then you compare that to the odds, the implied probability available that comes with the odds, to calculate if there's value on a bet. So if we take a look at the odds on Max Holloway, currently around about an average of 1.25, which is minus 400 for an implied probability of 80%. So to get any value on a bet on Max Holloway, you've got to give him an 85% or better chance of winning this fight. So when I say what I'm about to say, and you literally can't wait to scroll down, hit the dislike button, and call me a fool in the comments and tell me Max Holloway is going to knock Frankie Edgar out in 30 seconds, please just know I am not disagreeing with what you are saying. All I am saying is that with all the information we have available going into this fight, I don't believe you can give Max Holloway an 85% chance of winning this fight. Therefore, he is a bad bet. He is not worthy of being put in parlays or accumulators or any other possible way that you wish to bet him. Max Holloway's off the table because his advantages in this fight, his age advantage, his size advantage, his striking advantage, the fact that he's fucking incredible, all those factors are already priced into the odds, so there's no value here. This is not a discussion about who will win. This is a discussion about who is the better bet. So is Frankie the better bet? Well, if you look at his odds, he's currently around about an average of 4.30. Which is plus 330 for an implied probability of 23%. That's fucking crazy. There's value there. It doesn't matter how much I like Max. It doesn't matter how great I think Max is. You have to give Frankie Edgar more than a 23% chance of winning this fight. Quite a bit more, to be fair. I'd personally cap Frankie Edgar around about 40% in this fight. I'm 60-40 in favour of Holloway. 23% is just disrespectful to the body of work that Frankie Edgar has put together throughout his career. And it also makes some pretty big assumptions about Max Holloway's ability to deal with a high-level chain wrestler like Frankie Edgar. So please, I need to make this clear because I can already see the comments with everyone calling me a clown for even thinking that Frankie Edgar could win this fight. Everyone's going to tell me Holloway's going to knock him out. Yada, yada, yada. I agree with you. Yeah? I agree with you. But remember, making money in this game is about consistently putting your money in strong positions. And if we've got an implied probability of 23% on Frankie Edgar, you have to give him at least a 30% chance of winning, based on his body of work. And based on some things that I'm going to explain in a moment. In fact, I'm just going to tell you there's value on Frankie Edgar here. And rather than justifying it by being elusive, let's just get into why I think there's value. So, Frankie Edgar is one of the best MMA grapplers in the history of MMA. His ability to chain wrestle is second to none. Well, that's not true. All I'm saying is there are better chain wrestlers out there, Usman, Khabib, but Frankie's fucking up there. He's not quite on their level, but he's probably in the top 10 best chain wrestlers in the UFC. For a long time he was top 3, for a long time he was top 5. Over the last few years we've had some beasts like Gregor Gillespie pop up. But Frankie Edgar's probably in the top 10 best chain wrestlers in the UFC. He's got an NCAA Division 1 level wrestling background. And Frankie's also got the cardio, the toughness, the heart to relentlessly shoot on his opponents for 25 minutes and relentlessly chain wrestle for 25 minutes. Something that other high-level chain wrestlers, like Kevin Lee for example, can't do without slowing down. Even Colby Covington tends to slow down in the second or third round of fights. Frankie is an enigma really, because he is one of those guys that can relentlessly shoot and force his opponents to continually have to defend takedowns for 25 minutes, which is very, very unique because when you relentlessly shoot takedowns, you exert a lot of energy. So Frankie Edgar's got that freaky next level cardio. And it's very important to understand how good of a wrestler Frankie Edgar is. Because if you don't appreciate how good of a wrestler Frankie Edgar is, you may not understand, you may not fully appreciate the threat that his style of fighting poses to Max Holloway. Because in many ways, I think that MMA betting is quite similar to betting on the WWE. It's a lot more similar to betting on WWE than it is boxing. Because in MMA, I think quite often we see a fighter's popularity have a massive influence on the odds. Or we see a fighter's hype have a massive influence on the odds. And I believe that's what's happening here, because in order to cap Max Holloway as a 1.25 favourite, which is minus 400, for an implied probability of 80%, you are making some really, really, really big fucking assumptions on Max Holloway's skill set that are completely unproven. So a lot of people have a perception that Max Holloway has amazing takedown defense, and I'm not going to disagree with that, because you know he has shown flashes of amazing takedown defense, but at the same time his takedown defense is completely untested. If we look at his record over the last 6 years, we just go through the list of opponents that he's fought. He hasn't fought a strong offensive wrestler since he fought Dennis Bermudez back in 2013 and lost. Now again, before you go to scroll down and leave a nasty comment and tell me how, you know, Ortega's fought all these amazing grapplers, Holloway's fought all these amazing grapplers and completely shut them down, his takedown defense looked amazing. Let's just go back through the fights where he's fought grapplers and examine what actually happened. So Dustin Poirier, probably the strongest offensive wrestler he's fought in the last 6 years since he lost to Dennis Bermudez. But this was a stand-up fight because Dustin Poirier knows that when you shoot takedowns, you exert a lot of energy. So he didn't use his offensive wrestling in this fight. He chose to keep it standing. So cross Poirier off the list. Brian Ortega, yes, an elite grappler, but a very, very poor offensive wrestler. Doesn't have the offensive wrestling shots to take Holloway down. Doesn't really have any wrestling at all. He's a BJJ guy. Ricardo Lamas is a wrestler, but he's NCAA Division 3 level. He's 35, 36 years old when Holloway fought him, and Lamas has never been a very strong offensive wrestler. If you go back and watch Lamas's fights, really struggles to take his opponents down with offensive wrestling shots, and his chain wrestling is very poor. It is nowhere near the level of Frankie Edgar. Charles Oliveira, in 2019 as it stands today, Charles Oliveira is a very strong offensive wrestler. He has built tremendously good offensive wrestling into his skill set. But back in 2015, didn't have any offensive wrestling at all. Charles Oliveira was a Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, couldn't shoot in on his opponents, and the fight ended in 1 minute and 39 seconds anyway. Cole Miller, yes, he's a grappler, but again, no offensive wrestling. Primarily a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Clay Collard did have a wrestling background, but he's one of these wrestlers, like Tony Ferguson, that just chooses to keep fights standing instead, so didn't try and get Holloway to the ground here. Again, Andre Fili, similar to Charles Oliveira. In 2019, as it stands today, Andre Fili's a very strong offensive wrestler. Back in 2014, he wasn't. He was just a kickboxer. So the last time we saw Max Holloway fight a high-level offensive wrestler, he struggled bad. It was in 2013, 6 years ago, against Dennis Bermudez. And if you go back and watch this fight, there are a lot of red flags here with Holloway. First red flag is that his takedown defense isn't great. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. And the more alarming thing is when Bermudez actually did manage to take Holloway down, Holloway was a little bit like Curtis Melender in that as soon as you flattened his shoulders out on the canvas, he just went to full guard and had absolutely no idea how to work his way back to his feet. You know, there's two ways to approach being taken down. There's the team alpha male, where as soon as your butt hits the ground, you treat the ground like lava. You immediately pop back to your feet before your opponent can flatten your shoulders out on the canvas and establish a dominant position. You want to be like a team alpha male fighter, a Chad Mendes, a Josh Emmett, a Uriah Faber, a Cody Garbrandt, where your back, your shoulders do not touch the canvas. You immediately explode back to your feet. And then you've got the other kind of reaction to being taken down, like what a Curtis Melender does, where he might be difficult to take down, but as soon as you do take him down, he rolls to his back, his shoulders go flat on the canvas, and he goes to full guard. That is what Holloway did in the Bermudez fight. Looked very weak off his back. No idea how to work his way back to his feet. No idea how to defend himself. Very weak off his back. Now, 6 years was a hell of a long time ago. And within this time, Holloway has shown flashes of very good takedown defense against lower level offensive wrestlers than Bermudez and Edgar. And I'm sure in the last 6 years, Holloway's takedown defense and ground game have improved immeasurably. I'm sure they have. But we also have to remember that Max Holloway trains at a small MMA gym in Hawaii, surrounded by guys that aren't particularly strong offensive wrestlers, surrounded by guys that aren't particularly great on the ground, and surrounded by guys that don't have particularly great takedown defense. So even though I'm sure Holloway has improved tremendously since 2013 when he struggled against Bermudez, he's not exactly been training at the best gym to develop bulletproof takedown defense that you will need to keep a fight standing against one of the best offensive wrestlers, best MMA grapplers, and best MMA chain wrestlers of all time in Frankie Edgar. So the point that I'm trying to make is, everyone's assuming Max Holloway has amazing takedown defense, but there is no evidence of this. You know, there are plenty of fighters out there. Curtis Melender is probably the best example that shows good initial takedown defense. Ion Cutelaba is another one, shows great initial takedown defense. But as soon as you start chaining into different takedown attempts, you know, if they stuff your single or double leg takedown entry, start chaining the back control or a body lock, they tend to give up takedowns very easily. And what we've seen from Max Holloway over the last 6 years is that he does a great job stuffing that initial takedown entry. But as soon as, well, I can't say it's going to happen, but what I'm saying is he's only fought guys that can shoot in on that initial shot. He hasn't fought any chain wrestlers. And the best example that I can think of to illustrate how the walls can come crashing down on a fighter with seemingly amazing takedown defense when they fight a high-level chain wrestler. The best example I can think of is Edson Barboza. If you go back and watch Edson Barboza's career, he was basically impossible to take down. His takedown defense was impenetrable. It's amazing. Now, if you've just started watching MMA over the last couple of years, you might be saying, what the fuck are you talking about, Allsop? Like, I just watched Khabib ragdoll Edson. His takedown defense is terrible. And yes, my friend, you would be right, because the devil is in the detail. Edson Barboza, excellent at stuffing that initial takedown entry, just like we've seen from Holloway over the last 6 years. But as soon as you start chaining into different takedown attempts, like Khabib did against Edson, he was able to wet blanket and ragdoll Edson Barboza. And there's a very, very, very good chance we will see Frankie Edgar do the same thing to Max Holloway. Because Frankie Edgar is not going to be like Ricardo Lamas. He is not going to be like Brian Ortega. If he shoots a takedown and Holloway stuffs the first takedown entry, stuffs the single leg, the double leg, and he has to back up and go back into kickboxing range, that's fine, because he's going to try again. If he can drive Holloway into the cage, he's going to go from single leg. Okay, you stuffed that. I'm going to go to double leg. Okay, you stuffed that. I'm going to work for control of your body. Okay, you got underhooks in play and made that difficult for me. I'm going to back up. You know what? 30 seconds later, I'm going to try again. We don't know how Holloway's going to deal with that style of chain wrestling because we've never seen him deal with it before. So that's why the odds on this fight are absolutely insane. It is disrespectful to only give Frankie Edgar a 23% chance of winning this fight by the implied probability. And it is making huge assumptions, capping Holloway at 80%. It's ludicrous. There's definite value on Frankie Edgar here. And we also have to take into consideration the fact that Max Holloway is getting older and he's getting bigger. And it appears that the cut to 145 pounds is getting harder and harder and harder. You know, who knows? He might have a terrible weight cut this weekend. That might affect his durability, his cardio, his athleticism, his takedown defense. You know? Wouldn't be the first time we've seen a fighter underperform after a bad weight cut, and these weight cuts are getting a lot harder for Holloway. We know Frankie's got cardio for days. We know how tough he is. And one of the things about Frankie is that when he gets you down, when he gets into top position, his ground and pound is devastating. He can inflict an incredible amount of damage from top position, which again will take something out of Holloway if he's had a bad weight cut. Might make him less durable. You know, we've seen Edgar do terrible things, the likes of Cub Swanson and Yair Rodriguez on the ground, and I know that as a total package, those two guys are not on Holloway's level, but it's possible they're higher level grapplers. Cub Swanson's almost certainly a higher level grappler than Holloway, and he was completely helpless on the ground. In fact, Cub Swanson's compact body type makes it more difficult to hold him down than Holloway's, long, lean frame with long legs that you can control by stepping over into half guard. It makes it difficult for Holloway to get back up. And another excellent point that Dan Hardy brought up in the episode of Inside the Octagon this week when he broke this fight down is that he mentioned that Max Holloway has got a very, very thin torso, which will make it easier for Frankie Edgar to control his body on a body lock takedown and drag into the ground, a technique Frankie Edgar is particularly good at. So, if you ask me who I think will win this fight, I think Max Holloway is going to win this fight. I'd cap him at about 60%. He's more likely to win. But if we look at the odds, his implied probability is 80%. So if you cap him at 60%, that's a terrible bet. Whereas I capped Frankie Edgar at 30 to 40%. With his implied probability 23%, that's a great bet. You're getting at least a 7% margin on the bookie if you give him a 30% chance of winning. I personally believe it's 30, closer to 35-40%, which means you're looking at a 17% margin or a 12-13% margin over the bookie. That's fucking value. And remember, again, I don't care about picks. I don't care about being the smartest guy at the bar. I don't care who wins this fight. All I know is, if I consistently get my money in positions like this, where the odds are very wide, where the odds are very inaccurate, if I consistently place bets like this, then I will crush it long term, because these odds are off. The bookies are assuming that Max Holloway's takedown defense is bulletproof, and I have seen no evidence of this with 10 years experience betting on MMA, 4 years experience betting on MMA for a living as a professional gambler. I've seen no evidence. Sure, flashes of great takedown defense, but not against one of the best chain wrestlers in the history of MMA. Haven't seen Max Holloway deal with a chain wrestler. That's why there's value here. So yeah, I'm sure there are going to be loads of comments calling me a fool, calling me an idiot, telling me Holloway is going to knock Edgar out in 10 seconds. And yeah, you could be right. If the fight stays standing for what it's worth, I think Holloway will dominate. I think Frankie is screwed. Don't give Frankie any chance if the fight stays standing. But his path to victory is on the ground, and I believe he's got a decent chance of getting it there. Unfortunately, this is going to be one of those bets where I look like a genius or an idiot, because there's not going to be much middle ground. Either Max Holloway keeps the fight standing, stuffs all of Frankie's takedowns, turns him into a panic wrestler and dominates the fight standing. That's scenario 1. Or Frankie Edgar uses his trained wrestling to drag Holloway to the ground and beat him up with his wrestling. That's scenario 2. There's only 2 ways this fight's going to go. There's not much middle ground. So I'm either going to look like a genius or an idiot. But remember, betting on MMA is all about identifying all possible outcomes, all possible scenarios, all possible ways a fight can play out, assigning a probability to each way a fight could play out, and then referencing those scenarios, those outcomes with the odds to see if there is a value on a fighter. And I believe there's value on Edgar, even though I think he'll lose. But remember, you only have to win 1 in 3 of these bets to make a profit. So you can afford to be wrong 67% of the time and still make money. Just bear that in mind. So before Captain Hindsight comes to visit me in the comments next week, tells me I'm a fool for thinking Frankie Edgar had any chance, just remember, you're probably working a job you hate. And I sit in my pants all day, watching fights and betting on MMA for a living. I know what the fuck I'm talking about. And if you want to make money, you should value my opinion and listen to what I tell you. So with that being said, we've just spoken about how risk to reward, how bets with a good risk to reward ratio can help you make a lot of money long term. We've just spoken about how putting your money in strong positions will help you make money long term. Speaking of risky bets, Vivian Araujo was one of our biggest winners of the year. One of our biggest underdog bets of the year. One of our biggest winners. She's fighting again this weekend. You know, we bet Vivian Araujo earlier this year when she was at, 3.70 plus 270 underdog against Talita Bernardo. She was one of our biggest underdog bets of the year. Very risky bet. But again, we've only got to win 1 in 3 of these bets to make a profit. We're already free rolling on Frankie Edgar with the money we've made on other huge underdogs this year, like Czech Congo to beat Vitaly Minikov, like Vivian Araujo to beat Talita Bernardo. So I don't care about individual bets, don't care about picks, don't care about being the smartest guy in the bar. All I care about is traveling the world, taking care of my family, driving nice cars, living a happy life, and not having a fucking boss. The best way you can do that is by putting your money in strong positions consistently. If you do that, you will make money. You will make money. And the bet on Vivian Araujo at big underdog odds was a good example of that. When she beat Talita Bernardo earlier this year, Frankie Edgar is another good example of that. But it's very, very, very important for me to point out that Frankie Edgar is obviously a very high risk bet. It's obvious. The fight stays standing. Holloway's going to dominate. He's going to kill Frankie. Frankie has no chance if the fight stays standing. So don't go too big on Frankie. It really amuses me. A guy left a comment on last week's video, literally like 10 minutes after Steven Peterson lost to Alex Caceres. It was something like, ha 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 ha, you lost your shirt on Steven Peterson. And when I read comments like that, I'm like, I need to build a casino. Because people are so fucking stupid. Like, if you think that I would bet any significant or meaningful amount of money on one individual bet, then you're crazy. Especially a high risk bet like Steven Peterson. Like, you ever seen this dude fight? He fucking blocks punches with his face. Why would I bet any significant amount of money on a guy like that? You know, Vivian Araujo took this fight on 3 days' notice. You'd be a fool to bet a lot of money. You'd be a fool to commit a significant amount of your bankroll to a bet like Vivian Araujo. But it doesn't matter, because the risk to reward ratio is good enough to take a gamble. Do you see what I'm saying? Don't go big on Frankie Edgar this weekend. Use bankroll management. Be intelligent with your money. Yeah? Frankie Edgar's a strong position. Steven Peterson was a strong position. Vivian Araujo was a strong position. Jermaine Durandame was a strong position. But not all the bets are going to win. Because on bets like this, you have to take on some risk. A decent amount of risk. So a lot of these bets are going to lose. But at the end of the year, you know, 400, 500, 600 bets down the line over a 12-month period, as long as you make more money than you lose, who gives a fuck whether Frankie Edgar wins or loses on Saturday night? Who really cares? Who really cares? You know? So that's the point I'm trying to make. And Vivian Araujo is a very, very nice segue into the next fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is Alexis Davis against Vivian Araujo. And holy shit, it is getting warm in this room. It is getting very, very warm in this room. I am sweating and my computer is going to explode. Sounds like an aircraft is about to take off underneath my desk. It is the summertime in the UK. It is like 30 degrees and it's fucking hot, boys. Whew. Let me take a little drink after that. It's also 5:30 AM. It's almost daytime outside. Don't know if you can see, the lighting might have changed in the video. Because I thought I'll stay up, give my dad a little ring. Do you know what I mean? He's leaving for the hospital about 6 AM. Give him a little call, wish him well. He's going to be nervous and that, do you know what I mean? And that ankle replacement, it's quite big surgery, in his 70s. So give him a little pep talk. It's all good. He is all good. Right, Alexis Davis against Vivian Araujo. So obviously we made a lot of money betting on Vivian Araujo in her last fight. And she looked absolutely incredible. You know, in that fight, she demonstrated that she's got excellent footwork. She's a very, very technical kickboxer. Some of the best footwork in the division. She looked absolutely outstanding. She's also a very strong wrestler. You know, good takedown defense. Very high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Decent cardio. Pretty tough. And she was the flyweight champion in Pancrase. So Vivian Araujo is the total package. She's got everything. And that is why when she was a huge underdog in her UFC debut against Talita Bernardo, I couldn't believe my luck. Because quite frankly, this girl's fucking incredible. She shouldn't be a huge underdog to anyone in the division. However, unfortunately, now the cat is kind of out the bag. Because she looked so damn good against Talita Bernardo that for this fight, what have we got going on here? Best fight odds is, oh no. Oh no. Oh, my internet's gone down, boys. My internet has gone down. Right, that's fine. We're going to keep doing the video anyway. I know what the odds are, so I can just talk you through them. So Vivian Araujo is currently around about a 1.40 favourite, which is minus 250 for an implied probability of 71%. So that's the problem with how good Vivian Araujo looked in her UFC debut. Now the cat's out the bag. Everyone knows how good she is, and her skills are now baked into the odds. You know, women's MMA is a lot more predictable than men's MMA. You know, for whatever reason, female fighters tend to be a lot more inconsistent. I think they often have a lot more difficulties making the weight. You know, for whatever reason, they're just a lot more inconsistent. So whenever you are betting on a female fighter in this price range at these kind of odds, you need to be getting something really, really special. Because in order to get any value here at all on Vivian Araujo, you know, you need to cap her at having a 75 to 76% or better chance of winning. And that's very, very difficult because of how inconsistent female fighters are. Vivian Araujo is absolutely amazing. I love her. I think she's brilliant. I think she's a difficult stylistic matchup for Alexis Davis. I actually think Vivian Araujo is in the top 5 flyweights in the world. I think she's brilliant, but cannot cap her at 77% here, so there's no value in a bet on Vivian Araujo. So the current odds on Alexis Davis at the moment are around about 2.50, which is plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. And, this is a difficult stylistic matchup for Alexis Davis because, Alexis Davis doesn't have the best takedown defense, and we know, Araujo is a very strong offensive wrestler. She's quite weak off her back. We know Araujo's got a heavy top game. And while Alexis Davis is also a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, so is Araujo. They should cancel each other out in that respect. Standing up, from a technical perspective, Araujo is also at a much higher level than Alexis Davis. She's much more technical, she carries legit KO power, and she throws a much more diverse range of strikes, which makes her a tricky opponent for Davis because Araujo's got a lot of footwork, very elusive, throws a high volume of strikes, and Davis has got more of a slow plodding style where she walks forward, basically zombie mode like Steven Peterson, blocking punches with her face. And she does take a lot of damage in her fights. She wears a lot of damage, and she's not a particularly good offensive wrestler, which will make it very difficult for her to get this fight to the ground because Vivian Araujo has excellent takedown defense. Having said that, just like Steven Peterson, just like a lot of fighters that embrace zombie mode like Justin Gaethje or Tony Ferguson, in order to fight with that style, you've got to be a tough mamma jammer, and Alexis Davis absolutely is. She's the kind of fighter you have to practically kill in order to beat. She's a total warrior. She's a nightmare. She's extremely tough. And she will have no problem following Araujo around the octagon, walking her down, blocking punches with her face, just trying to put hands on Araujo. And one thing that I've noticed Araujo do, which is potential weakness here, or not so much what she does, but when I went back and watched her past fights in Pancrase, and also her fight against Talita Bernardo, there were clues that she may struggle against pressure fighters. A lot of fighters like Araujo, who are incredible at everything, who have blown through lower level opposition in smaller promotions like Pancrase, a lot of the time these fighters are very good at being the hammer, but not so good at being the nail. Ariane Lipski is a very good example of this. She was murdering girls in KSW. She's come into the UFC and struggled when girls have got in her face and roughed her up because she's used to dominating. And it's possible that Araujo could struggle in the same way, which is why I'm not interested in betting her at odds of 1.40 minus 250. In fact, I think the odds are a little bit better on Davis. I think she's around 2.60 for plus 160. But yeah, it's one of those fights where I definitely wouldn't bet on Araujo at these odds. She's too big of a favourite. I definitely wouldn't bet on Alexis Davis because it's a bad stylistic matchup for her. But she could win. We haven't seen how Araujo deals with pressure fighters. She's looked a little awkward against her past performance when they have pressured her. The difference is because she's faced a lower level of opponent and she does have so much power in her shots, she's able to back girls up. Girls aren't able to maintain that pressure against her. But we know Alexis Davis has no problem walking through the fire. She does have the toughness and the chin and the cardio to walk through Araujo's shots and pressure her for 15 minutes. That could make life difficult for Araujo. So it's a pass from me. But it's an interesting fight. Just a shame that Araujo's odds weren't a bit better. And if Araujo's odds did improve, if some money came in on Alexis Davis, and Araujo's odds improved to like 1.60, which is minus 167, which isn't a million miles away from where they are now. That would give Araujo an implied probability of about 63%. And at that point, I would be interested in betting on Araujo because I'd cap her at around about 70%, which is where her odds are at the moment. But obviously, because her odds do give her an implied probability of 71% right now, the odds are accurate. There's no value. It's a pass. And I was planning on showing you one of Seung Woo Choi's past fights, but since recording, it looks like the internet's actually gone down in my house, so I can't show that to you now, unfortunately. But it's available on YouTube. If you go to Spot TV's channel and just search for TFC 16, you will find it. He's the guy in the black shorts, and I mean not anything specifically that I wanted to show you about that fight anyway. So it's no big deal, and I don't want to record the video again, because then it'll just mean it'll be another 6 or 7 hours later before you guys get to see the video. So, Gavin Tucker against Sung Woo Choi. So, from memory, I thought that Gavin Tucker was very, very good. But after researching him this week, I'm definitely not as high as him. And this is why, doing fight research is so important, because a lot of people, when they bet on fights or they break down fights, they just work off win-loss records and they wiki cap fights, or they just work from hazy memories. And I promise you, your mind will play tricks on you, because I had some vision of Gavin Tucker as being like some incredible, Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw type fighter. And to be honest with you, he's more of a hyper value version of those guys, more of a bargain basement version of Dominic Cruz or TJ Dillashaw. Certainly utilizes a lot of footwork, a lot of unorthodox movement and patterns, but nowhere near as effective as either of those guys. Obviously, because otherwise he wouldn't be 10-1 and lost his last fight against Rick Glenn. But he's not as doesn't set things up as well, and he's quite reckless and sloppy on his entries into striking range. Tends to get caught with a lot of big counters. So there are a few X factors first of all to unpack about Gavin Tucker before we talk about this fight stylistically. The first thing is that he's 33 years old, which is getting up there. When fighters reach the age of 33, their body starts to naturally, produce lower levels of testosterone, which means their athletic performance tends to decline significantly every year after the age of 33. Of course, there'll be outliers that develop and mature and peak later on in their career, but as a general rule, past the age of 33, fighters tend to decline. It's also not good that someone this age is quite inexperienced with only 11 pro fights. And also another thing to take into consideration is he's quite undersized for the division. So at 5'7" with a 66-inch reach, he'll be giving up a huge size and reach to Choi, who is 5'11" with a 74.5-inch reach. Here we can see Choi will actually have an 8-inch reach advantage over Tucker, which will make it difficult for Tucker to get inside and land anything, especially because his entries into striking range aren't particularly good. Also have to take into account the fact that he hasn't fought in almost 2 years, so not good being this inactive and this inexperienced. But he took the last 2 years off to move the TriStar to train under Firas Zahabi, which sometimes is a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. Firas Zahabi is one of the best MMA coaches in the world. TriStar is one of the best MMA gyms at the world, but I feel like sometimes fighters go there and they actually regress and decline just because it's almost like they get overwhelmed with so many new techniques. They actually end up tying themselves up in knots and their output reduces and they end up being more passive than they were before. It's kind of like when Mike Perry moved to Jackson's MMA. It's the best example I can think of where, when he trained at his own gym back in Miami, he was this ruthless killer and that's what made him great. And then as soon as he started to fight at Jackson's and tried to perform more tactically, it actually changed everything about him that was good, and he didn't have as much success. And you see that about a lot of guys that move to TriStar. Either they go there and they excel, or they go there and regress. So the jury's out on Tucker. Makes it difficult to cap this fight because 2 years training under Firas Zahabi means that he could have improved a hell of a lot, and he could come into the fight on Saturday night looking absolutely outstanding, or he might have declined, or he might be suffering from bad ring rust and look absolutely terrible. There's just no way to know. But one thing that we do have to take into consideration is the fact that this fight is taking place in Canada, and obviously Gavin Tucker is Canadian, so he's going to have home advantage on his side. Just remember that Canadians win around 65% of the time when they fight non-Canadians on UFC events in Canada. So home advantage is a big deal in Canada, and if it ends up being a relatively close fight, chances are the judges will give Tucker the nod. You know, we saw a very, very bad hometown decision last weekend where Francisco Trinaldo clearly beat Alexander Hernandez, but they gave Hernandez the hometown Texas decision. So from a stylistic point of view, you know, we know it's difficult to kind of predict what version of Tucker we're going to get on Saturday night, because he hasn't fought in so long. Ring rust might affect him. Don't know how he's going to look after being out for 2 years. He's also 2 years older now, and who knows what kind of impact TriStar is going to have. But this is actually a tough fight because Seung-Woo Choi is not bad. Very technical kickboxer. Also hits very hard. Obviously, he's got a massive size advantage. And if the fight stays standing, I do actually give Choi quite a decent chance of winning this fight. He's very good, actually. Very, very good. One of the things that I like about Choi is that he's got very, very heavy counters. So in a few of his past fights, I've actually seen him drop opponents when they recklessly come into his boxing range with counters. That's quite significant in this fight because Tucker's kind of got goofy, sloppy entries into boxing range. And I do believe Choi's reach advantage and ability to counter will help him land some really big shots on Tucker. We actually seen him get dropped by Rick Glenn in his last fight when he recklessly entered boxing range and Glenn caught him with a counter. So something Choi is particularly good at, which is definitely a part of the victory for him. The one issue I've got with Choi is that even though his takedown defense isn't terrible, like his takedown defense is very average. You can put him on the ground, but it's not terrible. When you actually do put him on the ground, he's very, very weak off his back. Just tends to go to full guard, like we were talking about in the Holloway fight earlier on. And you can rack up a good few minutes of top control. And even though Gavin Tucker's primarily a striker, you know, he does have a small, compact body type, which will make it easier for him to, you know, shoot deep takedown entries on Seung-Woo Choi. And he has shown flashes of being a pretty strong grappler in his past fights. And also, with him training at TriStar, you know, Faraz Sahabi's not stupid. He's one of the best MMA coaches in the world. He always goes into fights giving his fighter a solid game plan. They're going to have watched footage on Seung-Woo Choi. They're going to know that this guy's got questionable takedown defense and a low-level ground game. So they might have done a grappling-heavy camp, come into the fight with a grappling heavy game plan and look to just take Choi down and control him on the ground. So at the moment, the odds on this fight, Gavin Tucker is currently around about a 1.80 favourite, which is minus 125 for an implied probability of 56%. There's no way I can bet Tucker here. You know, he's getting older, hasn't fought in 2 years, ring rust is a real issue. Who knows how he's going to look training at TriStar. He's also not really got a significant advantage anywhere. And he's undersized for the division, even though that might help him get takedowns. And Seung-Woo Choi, the odds on him are 2.0 at the moment, which is plus 100 for an implied probability of 50%. So the bookies are really seeing this as roughly a 50-50 fight. You know, they're seeing it as a 50-50 fight. I do lean slightly towards Choi, but it is a very high risk bet and I would want much better than odds of 2.0. I'm actually pretty jealous. His odds last week were 2.8, which is plus 180, and his odds got absolutely steamed. So shout out to you. Congratulations if you bet Choi at odds of 2.80 plus 180. I think he was a great bet at these odds. But at odds of 2.0 plus 100, it's a pass for me. But this is going to be one of those riskier bets that I do like. It is a Steven Peterson type bet where if the odds move to the point where I can get a decent amount of value, a decent margin in the odds, I will take a gamble on Choi. You know, Gavin Tucker's a popular fighter. He's Canadian. You know, we're still 4 days before UFC 240 takes place. We might see some line movement. We may see Tucker's odds improve. So I will keep an eye on Choi's odds, and if his odds were to improve to 2.30, 2.40, I'd probably take a gamble on Choi, probably take a small bet on him. But just like Peterson, it is a risky bet, so I need good value in the odds to take that gamble, and there's not that much value at odds of 2.0. So yeah, it's a pass for now, but I am interested in betting Choi. So that is pretty much it for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back tomorrow breaking down another 3 fights. Please like the video if you appreciated this content. It would mean a lot. And subscribe also if you haven't already. And also, you know, let me know in the comments below, you know, what you think of the stuff I've said in today's video. I read all your comments, even the nasty ones. I love you all. And let me also know what fight you'd like me to break down in part 2. So take care, guys. I am going to give my dad a call now before he hits the hospital. Wish him luck. Love you guys. Take care, and I will see you all soon.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking about.